No longer are they saying, Miss Cho, if I would have just had that 0.1% more, I could have had my A, right? So I think we're making progress. I would like to believe that we're making progress.
Yes, absolutely.
So when I came in 4 years ago, I had come in with the understanding that the school was ready to actually move toward it. There has been conversation about it, right? Because the idea of standards-based grading or standards-based practices isn't new, right? This idea and conversation over grading is, 100 years old, and we're talking about it still. And there's so much research out there as to why these practices are better than just the traditional way of grading, which is here's a 100-point scale, and out of that 100-point scale, here's a delineated, clear cut. This is the A, B, C, D, and then F range, right? Is the 60-point range. So all of those conversations were in the talks and the works, but that actual shove forward hadn't happened yet. And then coming together to say, okay, what we will do is X, Y, Z, and having a plan and building that timeline. I worked in the history of grading and getting the expert voices and pulling those together to say, here's why the traditional grading is actually quite subjective. Because the fact that we have decided that a 90 to 100 is the A range and a 100-point scale in and of itself is subjective anyway. That's arbitrary, right? But at the same time, within that, whatever you end up giving at the end, we have to have a descriptor for what that is. So then we went through a lot of work refining what it means for us to have consistency across the school when we say a kid is exemplary or proficient or approaching or emerging. And we had defined across the school from little guys all the way to the top what those descriptors mean. And with that definition, then teachers have to stick to that, right? They're like, oh, I see. This is what I'm looking at. And when I give a specific assignment, here are the standards. And in order for you to do this with sophistication, right, they have to actually create assessments that give them that opportunity for sophistication. For the little guys, we changed that word to making deeper connections. The why is because we really do want to ensure that our students are taking away skills that are transferable, skills that will, as best we can, prepare them for something beyond school as we know it in the traditional sense that we grew up. And that we want to ensure that they know that the teachers here are here to help them learn, not teach them things. So we did that with, again, not just my voice alone, but also getting teacher feedback and getting in Tom Guskey's voice, Tom Schumer's voice, like what are some of the areas where you can give us some feedback? Here's the specific work that we're doing. And then bringing in other experts to continually help us kind of mold that into what fits KIS. And so that anybody who's onboarding, they understand we have clear descriptors for our progression ranges. And we will continue to reflect on that and see. But I actually had a kid who said, oh yeah, it totally makes sense, right? When they tell me I can't get above a proficient, it's because the descriptor says X, and until I've learned it and I get to this point where I get to show that, that makes total sense. I go, so you're okay with that? Yeah. And for me, that's like, right, because that's what we're getting at. A student needs to know what it is that they are trying to learn and how to get there. And when a student, right, tells me, it's very clear what my teacher tells me I need to do. I understand that. And it makes sense why I would only be meeting the standards, right? And in order for me to get to that next level, I have to have the basics and the foundation for me to get there. For a kid to say that, And I'm like, oh, that's great.